ready? Are we ready to go? All right. We're gonna continue our study from Ephesians. I don't know. We started 3 or 4 weeks ago. Took a break when Jude spoke last Sunday. We're going to be on Ephesians. It's a short little letter. It's only 6 chapters. I think I'm going to stay on Ephesians longer than I'm going to go in smaller segments in Ephesians than I've ever done. Some of it's because it is a short letter. Some of it is because I've been struck by the importance of the letter, at least from my perspective, of when it was written, why it was written, and what was going on in the Apostle Paul when he wrote the letter, which I covered in the introduction in 2 weeks. By the way, I guess the announcements were up there. The teachings, all the teachings from our study in Hebrews are now on the website. I did Romans 6, 7, and 8, and I realize self-promotion is not becoming, but 6, 7, and 8 in Romans is very important. Today will actually be somewhat of a reflection from Romans 6, 7, and 8, which you'll see in a minute. But this morning, and also, I know I've mentioned this before, but I want to keep mentioning it. I'm going to do a 3-part Sunday morning series on Watchman Nee and his famous book, Sit, Walk, Stand. How many of you know who Watchman Nee is? Okay. Watchman Nee's book, Sit, Walk, Stand. I have a list of, not that you care, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I have a list of 20 books that I think every Christian should read, and Watchman Nee's Sit, Walk, Stand is on that list. I mean, if you think about, all the books that I've read, all the books that I've read in 42 years, and I would tell you I've read a lot. I've read a lot of Christian writings. So I put together this list because I've had Christians over, the years ask me, what books do you think I should read? And so I have a list of 20. And the fact that Watchman Nee's book is on this list, I just got it in the mail and asked Tanner if he had ever read it, and he said no. And so I took the book and I said, okay, I want you to read chapter 1, and then I want you to come and talk with me. And he goes, well, I don't want to take it because I got it to help me prepare to do it here. And he goes, well, I don't want to take it if you hadn't read it. And I said, oh, I've read it. I've read it about 6 or 7 times. I've taught through the book 4 or 5 times. It's a very, very good book. It's a classic. It will be read if the Lord doesn't return. It will continue to be read for hundreds and hundreds of years. And that's the kind of book that I like, are things that have stood the test of time. Our Christian bookstores are filled with junk. People just publishing books that won't be read in another 5 years. Watchman Nee's books are a collation of his teachings and things that he had written. He never physically wrote a book, but his followers, after he died in prison in China, his followers put together notes and from memory and put together most of the works of Watchman Nee. And we're talking in the, I think he died in the 50s. And, so these books are really good. So, I don't know. I'm just telling you guys, if you have any interest, I'm going to, I think I'm going to take some of the most dynamic passages out of Watchman Nee, and I'm going to scan them and put them on our website and hope that, no one gets crazy and decides to sue me. I can assure you Watchman Nee would not want he would not want anybody to come after me for that. So I'm going to cover Ephesians chapter 2, having a biblical self-image. I did a 5-week series at my church in North Carolina, and I titled it Grace to You, a study from Ephesians, which included 3 weeks on Watchman Nee. The word grace, we sang about it this morning, amazing grace, how sweet the sound, and that's what I'm going to focus on this morning. What is grace? Because grace is used more frequently in the letter to the Ephesians than any other New Testament writing. Now, it's used numerically more times in Romans, but Romans is a lot longer letter than Ephesians. So in Romans, just to give you some little data, for those of you who like it, there are 433 verses in Romans, and the word grace is used 1 out of every 24 verses. In Paul's letter to the Ephesians, grace is used once out of every 13 verses. So you can see almost twice as many occurrences in Ephesians as in Romans. So for starters, let's read the famous chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. There it is. I mean, these are famous verses that a lot of people memorize. For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. So I'm going to focus on grace this morning, but I'm going to approach it in a way that is slightly different, maybe slightly unexpected perhaps. Yeah, I believe grace, the grace of God, and the nature and character of God's grace and judgment, and the idea of grace and our struggle with sin and our struggle to live for God are like two sides of a coin. And I'm sure you've heard this analogy before, that something is like two sides of a coin, heads and tails. You know, Jesus is heads, Jesus is fully God. Tails, Jesus is fully man, right? Things like that. Heads, God is one. Tails, He's three in one, right? Okay. Well, I believe grace and how we can relate to grace is very similar to that. Heads is the amazing love of God that we sang about this morning. His great mercy and compassion for you. And tails is your tendency to live for yourself, to be selfish. You know, the Bible uses the word sin, and I like to use selfish, because sin, we conjure up all kinds of ideas if you're a Christian and you've been raised in church. And if you're not a Christian, you've heard people talk about sin and you don't know what it means if you're not a believer. But selfish, that's what I used to tell students on a university campus if they weren't Christian at all. If they were an atheist, I would tell them the problem is selfishness. You are selfish. Oh no, and we're going to talk about that. But it's like two sides of a coin, and both are somehow true. Hey Hunter, you got that video ready? And I want to illustrate it with this little video in super slow motion of a quarter spinning. Heads and tails. You can't tell which is which until it slows down, and then suddenly you see. It's not as easy to see, but it's actually easier on my computer than it is on the big screen. But you get the picture. When you spin a quarter like that, you can't see heads and tails because it spins so fast. I believe that God and His nature and character is like that. So we have heads, the justice of God, that selfishness and disobedience demands a penalty. And then the other side of the coin is the grace of God. He has exceeding love and mercy for the people He created. But when you spin the quarter, you love mercy, or justice, mercy, justice, mercy, justice, mercy, as fast as you can. Does that make sense to you? And so the nature and character, and a lot of things in the Christian faith are like this. It's seemingly opposing, like yin and yang in the ancient or Asian constructs. Various things in our Christian faith seem to be opposites, and both are true. And it's like two sides of a coin, only for me, this morning, I'm going to focus on one side of the coin. But in reality, God is so dynamic, it's a constant spinning to the point where you can't see either one. They meld, they become somehow unified. Excuse me. So let's read the beginning of chapter 2, Ephesians, starting in verse 1. You were dead through the trespasses and sins in which you once lived, following the course of this world, following the ruler of the power of the air. Who would that be? That would be the demonic spirits, the gang of Lucifer, Satan. The spirit that is now at work among those who are disobedient. All of us lived among them, the people, in the passions of our flesh, following the desires of flesh and our senses. And we were by nature children of wrath, like everyone else. Verse 4, but God, who is rich in mercy, from His great love, even when we were dead through our sins, He made us alive together with Christ. And then it's that famous verse I read at the beginning, for by grace you have been saved through faith. Not of your own doing, it is the gift of God. And that's why we chose the songs this morning, Amazing Grace, and then the Reckless Love. The part which says, I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Yet you give yourself away. This text in Ephesians 2 reminds me of a parallel text in Romans 5 that I want to read. And those of you who know me know that one of the rules of good biblical exegesis is you stay on the text. You don't grab verses everywhere to support what you're trying to argue. But I believe that Romans chapter 5 is a parallel to Ephesians 2. Now, if my view of Paul and his letters are correct, and obviously I think it is, I can't guarantee that because, maybe 5 years from now I'll change my opinion. But if my view is correct, the letter to the Romans is already written by the time he writes to the Ephesians. Writes the letter that we call Ephesians. And so it's already in his head what he wrote in Romans chapter 5, and I want to read that text. I believe it's a parallel. Romans 5, starting in verse 6. For while we were still weak, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. Indeed, rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person someone might actually dare to die. But God, remember the Ephesians text has but God. But God proves His love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. For if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of His Son, much more surely have we been reconciled, will we be saved by His life. So what is grace? I think I've heard people say unmerited favor and things like that. There's a Newsboys song that I really like, and the chorus basically says that I think is a great description of grace. When you get what you don't deserve, that's a real good thing. So when we get good things in life, because we don't deserve good things, we really don't deserve God's goodness, but He gives it to us, and that's a good thing. That's grace. And then the Newsboys finishes it by saying, when you don't get what you do deserve, that's a good thing, and that's also grace. I would tell you I deserve hell right now more than I've ever deserved it, because I still don't live 100% for God, even though I've been doing it for 42 years and I know better. I still don't. I still fail. And so when I don't get what I deserve, which is God's wrath and judgment, that's grace as well. But I think we fail to understand grace, a lot of us. And I believe before you can fully understand grace, what God has done for you, you have to fully embrace your situation and what you deserve. And that's what I call having a biblical self-image. We usually think and preach that in order to live a healthy life, we need to have a good self-image, don't we? That's what our culture's been preaching since Dr. Spock. You youngsters don't know who he was, but he was a famous child psychologist who wrote a book that my parents had on their bookshelf. What? No, not that Spock, not Star Trek. Dr. Spock, and he laid the seedbed for what our culture has embraced, and that is everybody's good, everybody's lovely, tell your child how wonderful they are, and now everybody gets a gold star. We don't want anyone to feel left out. You know, winning and losing is not important. How you act is not important. And we've lost the sense of any kind of justice in our culture. And that reveals itself in many, many ways. But look at the terms that Paul uses in Romans 5 to explain our situation. It doesn't matter what I use, I can mess up. There it is. No. Next slide. Next slide, Hunter. Oh, then go back one. You know what? That must have been downloaded before I finished. I re-downloaded it. Anyway, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You can go back. Yeah, that's fine. But look at how Paul, look at the descriptives that Paul uses. When we were weak, when we were ungodly sinners, when we were enemies of God. How many of you think you're an enemy of God right now? How many of you think you're an enemy of God? I mean, none of us would raise our hands. Now, this is in past tense. Paul's talking about the condition we were in. But I'm going to present to you the concept that left to your own devices, you are still weak, ungodly, all of us. Not just you, me. And we are, left to our own devices, we are enemies of God and His kingdom. Let me illustrate why I think this. 35 years ago, when I was living here in Troy, I did volunteer work in one of the prisons. Now, it was a low-security prison, but there were a lot of bad dudes there. And it was my first time to ever be in any kind of prison construct. And so I had a learning curve. The first thing I learned was that nobody was guilty in prison. Did you know that? Yeah. Nobody's guilty in prison. You go talk to any inmate, and they're going to say, no, I didn't do it. I'm innocent. I got a bad rap. The cops set me up. I had a bad lawyer. The judge didn't like me. That everyone and it's actually a joke among the prisoners. What are you in for? I didn't do it. Why are you in prison? Oh, I didn't do it. I'm innocent. And until they get to know you, that's what they're going to tell you. Nobody's guilty in prison. I talked to John about how he needs Christ in his life. And he would say, oh, hey, listen, man, I'm a good person. I never hurt anybody. I'm not like Bill over there. All I did was stole stuff. I never was violent. I just stole stuff from people. I didn't really hurt anybody. I'm not like Bill over there. So I'd go talk to Bill. And Bill would say, hey, I'm not a bad person. Yeah, I robbed a couple of stores with a loaded gun, but I never intended, and I never shot anybody. I never would shoot anybody. Now Sam over there, he's killed people before. I'm not a bad person. Go talk to Sam. He needs Jesus. So I go talk to Sam. Yeah, I killed that guy, but it was in self-defense. In fact, everybody I've killed was coming after me, and I was defending myself. I'm not a bad person. I'm not like Joe. Joe over there is evil. He killed a lot of people. So I'd go talk to Joe. And Joe would say, yeah, look, I'm not a bad person. Sure, I killed some people, but everybody I killed deserved to be killed. Here's what's amazing. I heard the same thing on university campuses. I've shared the gospel on, I don't know, 12 or 15 university campuses. I've preached open air, I've talked to students one-on-one, and I heard the same story from university students as I did from prisoners, some of whom had done vicious crimes. I'm not a bad person. And then they would compare themselves to someone who they perceived was not as bad as they are. And that's what all of us do. Every one of us does that. We compare ourselves to people that make us look good. I've never heard a single person say, I'm a good person. You know what? I'm kind of like Mother Teresa. I'm kind of like Billy Graham. I do good. I live my life to do good. I'm kind of like Mother Teresa. Anybody ever heard anybody say that? No. Who in their right mind would say that? Nobody. We compare ourselves to someone who we think makes us look better. If you truly want to understand God's awesome mercy and grace, you need to embrace your utter helplessness to serve God and to be found by God as worthy of His love and mercy. You are utterly helpless on your own to know God's goodness. And if you can't come to grips with that, then I'm going to submit to you that you do not understand grace. Because before you can understand His goodness, you have to realize that you don't deserve it at all. That's what we just sang. Oh, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a pretty good person like me. That saved a person who really loves Him. I love and care about people, Lord, and I'm glad your amazing grace saved me. No! It's who saved a wretch like me. Which is right out of Paul's writings, by the way. But Al, I'm not a bad person. If you think that, now listen to me. If that thought crosses your mind, you have been duped. You have been deceived by Dr. Spock and the kingdom of the power of darkness that rules over this country and over this world. I'm not suggesting that you're an evil person, but you are not a good person. Nor am I. Let me go further. Can you imagine a child? And I'm a parent. Some of you are not parents, but you can perceive this because every one of you has parents. I go to my child's bedroom and it's an utter disaster. It's like a tornado hit their room. And I say, Hope, you need to clean your room. I'm going to come back in an hour and this room better be cleaned. And then I leave and I go do what I'm doing. And when I come back after an hour, Hope's sitting there playing a video game. Now my kids didn't do this, but nowadays that's the deal. And you walk back in and your child is playing a video game and they hadn't touched their room. And you say, what are you doing? I told you to clean your room. And the child says, without even moving away from their game, the child says, hey, I told you to clean your room. And your child says, Dad, it's not like I robbed a bank or something. Come on. I'm a good kid. I didn't clean my room. What's the parent going to do? Oh, you know what? You're right. You're not a bad kid. You know what? Just live in a pigsty, You don't have to clean your room because you're a good kid. You're not out stealing. You're not out robbing banks. You haven't murdered any class. You're not bullying anybody. So you know what? I'll let you go. No parent would do that, I hope. I tell you what I would do is I would come back. I'd tell my child, and actually I never had to. Dear God, help me. I would tell my kids. I never said I'll be back in an hour. Well, I did say I'll be back in an hour.
Makes the case for not bad.
I'll illustrate. Maybe God's doing this to illustrate my own sinfulness. I had the thought run through my mind to throw my phone right there. Because I'm so irritated by this.
Lori would appreciate
God,
that.
help me, Lord. Help me, Jesus. This is ridiculous. Yeah, I wanted to throw my phone right there, so I'm confessing my sin right there, my impatience. I would go to my kids and I would tell them, I'm coming back in an hour. Anything on the floor, I'm coming back with a big black garbage bag. anything on the floor goes to the trash can. I'm throwing it away. And one time I did that, and I came back, and I can't remember which daughter it was, and their room was really cleaned up, and I thought, good job. And I went and opened the closet. And I said, all right, look, you cleaned your room up, now clean this closet up. This is ridiculous. How are you going to find, but you get what I'm telling you. The child says, well, I didn't rob a bank. I refuse to use that phone. Okay, sorry. Hope I didn't break it, but if I did, so be it. God, it doesn't have I never have had a cover on my phone. What do you call them? Yeah, I've never had a cover on my phone. But it wasn't concrete. All right. All right. I apologize, but follow me here. When you think you're a good person, I want to ask you a couple questions. Okay? Because with a parent, my goal is not to keep my child from becoming a bank robber, for God's sake. That's obvious. My goal is not to keep my child from becoming a convicted felon. My goal for my children is that they be individuals who make a positive contribution to the world. That they be good examples of God's kingdom in their lives. And that they help people and they show God's love and mercy. My goal is not that they not be a bad person. My goal is that they be all that they can be for the good of God and His kingdom. And that's God's desire for us. So you think you're a good person? Try this on for size. And I'm going to judge myself by this. When was the last time you took someone out to eat lunch with money or food that you gave up to buy them lunch? When was the last time you found a homeless person and took them to eat lunch? And I don't mean you sat and ate with them. I mean you skipped a meal to feed a homeless person or to feed a homeless family. When was the last time you went out of your way to help somebody? In a sacrificial way. I don't mean you're driving somewhere and you stop and say, hey, do you need any help? And they go, no, I got somebody coming. Okay, see you later. When was the last time you put yourself out for someone in that context? How many of you sent money to the hurricane victims, the flood victims in South Carolina? How many of you sent money to them? Okay. Neither did I. Being a good person is a lot more than not being a bad person. It means living a sacrificial life. Now, I have done things sacrificially in my life. I do extend myself. When was the last time you took someone down to the power company and paid their power bill? When was the last time you paid someone's phone bill? When was the last time you paid a bill for someone who was struggling and you didn't have the money to pay your bill, but you paid their bill instead because you were moved with compassion for that person and you said, God, help me. I'm going to give myself sacrificially to help this person and I'm hoping you'll help me, God. If you don't, I'm going to do it anyway to help them. How many of you have done that? No, none of us have done that. Neither have I. I probably live a sacrificial life. 1% of my life is sacrificial. And I wouldn't want to boast for that. Because that's not what God's looking for out of my life nor yours. Wouldn't you hate it? And I'm not saying you're not saved. I'm not saying I'm not saved. But which one of us would like to stand before God and have Him play a video, a virtual, a virtual video, a hologram video of your life had you lived it 90% sacrificially for His kingdom? How many of you would want to see that video? I don't. I might live 1% of my life sacrificially. I do not want to see that video. But if I saw that video and God said, I don't really want you in my kingdom, because if you had lived an obedient life to me, if you had really been all out for me, this is what your life would have looked like. I would deserve that. I would deserve that. We don't like to think about that, but it's the God-honest truth. He didn't save you so that you would look at him and because you haven't done what he's asked you. You haven't cleaned your room up, and you go, "Come on, Lord, I'm not a bad person. I haven't robbed a bank. I haven't." You got your video controller in your hand. You're the video controller of your life that you are living for yourself, and you've got it in your hands. And you look at Jesus and you say, "Well, but Jesus, I'm not a bad person. I didn't rob a bank. I didn't kill anybody. I mean, I love you people." God would play you a video showing you what your life could look like if you really wanted to honor him. And he would do it to me too. And if he did, I'm not going to argue with it and say what I just said that I might respond. Now, God doesn't do that to us. But that's a picture of where we live, you guys. And the grace of God is constantly given to you. You live on his planet that he created, and you breathe his air freely every day. Without oxygen, you would die immediately. And he allows you to live every day, breathing his air, living on his planet, enjoying his goodness. And all he's asking from us is to live for him. And he doesn't demand he doesn't demand the 90% sacrificial. But as a good parent, he wants us to make him proud. He's not after us so we won't rob banks and sit around snorting cocaine all day. You know what I mean? God's not saved us so that we'll just not be desperately wicked. He saved us to be a reflection of him on this planet. And when we're not, that's why we need grace. And I'm as guilty as anybody. Now, what I just described to you was not in my head when I was your age, the university students. No, I didn't think this way. And that's why I deserve God's wrath more now than I did when I was first saved. Because I understand a lot better what he wants from me. And I still don't do it. Not the way I know I should. Now look, do I live in condemnation? Absolutely not. But knowing that I don't deserve his goodness opens me up to understand, oh my gosh, God, you have showered upon me a wonderful sense of being your child. And you love me dearly. I can't believe it, God, because I know what I deserve. And I just think to understand grace, we have to embrace that. Now, it's like the coin spinning. I have focused on tails. Okay? I have focused on the back side of the coin. We sang about the front side. I have focused on the back side. The coin is spinning so fast we can't distinguish between the two. Now, personally, the coin spinning like that, to me, is the grace of God in my life. Because if God only showed me, son, you're not cleaning, you're not doing it right. Oh man, it would be brutal. I would not enjoy being in his kingdom because I fail every day. I fail all the time. And he doesn't do that to us. That's because he's gracious to us. He's loving to us. He's beckoning us to just follow me. And I'll help you become more like me. And it won't happen overnight. But don't stop trying to become like me. And I'll help you along the way. And of course, the unfortunate thing for us is sometimes to get us more towards where he wants us to be, what does he do? Somebody tell me what we have to experience to become more like him. Pain, hardship. He puts us in moments that are difficult to try to urge us to move forward. Okay. If I had my notes, I had a better way to close this message, but my own, when we read in that text, the passions, you remember the Ephesians text, we once lived among them with the passions. I believe we tend to think sexual passion in our culture, But what I just did was an expression of passions of humanity, of flesh. And I went in through my phone because I just figured, it's in my mind, it's in my heart. I was really irritated, so I might as well do it. And I thought it might be funny too. But that's the kind of struggle we're in. I don't live under condemnation. That's Romans chapter 8. I just described Romans 7, 5 and 7. But we don't live under condemnation because God is gracious. He is loving. He is merciful. Always. I just believe, and I wanted to express this morning, that to fully understand the goodness of God requires us to face the fact that we don't deserve it. And see, I believe some of us feel like we do deserve God's grace. We do deserve His goodness. I mean, a lot of us sit around, we want more. We want more money. We want more stuff. We want more happiness. We want more peace in our life. We want more. I want more, God. I want more. Jeff oftentimes prays, more, Lord, more. And does God want to bless us? Sure He does. Every parent wants to bless his or her children. But what's in our heart is what I'm focused on the back side of the coin. Some of us think we deserve good stuff all the time. That's not an understanding of grace. Grace is that God gives us what we don't deserve, which is goodness and love and mercy. And He does it all the time. And what He wants from us is to put down the controller and to do what He asks us to do. Clean your room. I told you to clean your room, and we don't hesitate. We want to live obedient to Him, so we clean our room. Forgive your brother. Okay, I'm going to go forgive my brother. I'm not going to sit back and go, I don't want to. Go and tell this person that I love them. Now, I've had to do that many times when I didn't want to do it because it was hard. Somebody I'd never met before. That's how I met my wife. I was in a laundromat and I saw her sitting over there, and I felt the Lord say, go tell that girl. I knew who she was, but I didn't know her. Go tell her that I love her. And I'm like, she'll think I'm an idiot. What am I going to walk up to her and say, oh, by the way, God loves you? And the Lord was like, I want her to know that I love her. And I'm like, oh my. Well, I eventually did it, but I fought it. Okay, so talk to me. Do you feel like I flogged you? I didn't want to flog. I'm not meaning to flog you. We just focused on the backside of the coin. Somebody tell me what you heard, what you felt. What is God saying to you through this? Anybody? Do we need to have an altar call and sing "Just As I Am"? Just as... I need to learn that. Remember the song Brett led us in, "Just As I Am"? That was a really good rendition of that. I need to